So for those of you online, we're passing out a little card that explains what the Paramitas are. Kind of see it. So thank you all for being here on this rather chilly night. I know it's tempting to stay at home in your cozy, warm house, but I mean we have our own form of coziness here. So welcome. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I'm here. Yes, I want to talk about the Dana Paramita. This is, as I said in that introduction that Michael read to you, this is the time of the year when we are asked to donate. And also, it's only a couple of weeks now before an event called Giving Tuesday, which is one of the major fundraisers that our meditation center participates in. It's a very important fundraiser to us. And I will touch on that later. But during this time of year, as I'm thinking about Giving Tuesday and also thinking about meditations and collections and donations, I realize that every day I get at least one request for making a donation. And probably in the last couple of weeks, I think I've received at least 18 letters asking me to contribute. They're all worthy causes, I'm sure. Places like Doctors Without Borders and Visiting Nurses, St. Jude's, Partners in Health. I'm just giving you a very short list. Dallas Life Homeless Recovery Center, Operation Kindness, Boys Town, the Nature Conservancy, and there are more. So having received all of these requests for donations, brought to mind the Dana Paramita, which is one of the 6 perfections or the 6 paramitas. That word paramita translates as perfection. And it's another one of those bodhisattva ideals that we may never perfectly realize, but we move in that direction. And so we're going to talk about how do we move in that direction? What does it look like? And what the heck is a paramita? One of the ways that paramita can be translated, besides perfection, is perfect realization. Thich says that the Chinese character for the paramita means crossing over to the other shore, meaning the shore of peace, non-fear, and liberation. In other words, enlightenment. And he says, if you want to cross over to the other shore, you have to do something. You have to make an effort. And this practice of Dana Paramita is one of the efforts that we can make to cross over to the other shore. So the card that you got shows you the 6 practices, and I realize it's dim in here and it's hard to read this tiny print, but when you get it at home you can look at it more carefully. So the practices are, first one is Dana. If you're holding your card so that it says 6 paramitas at the bottom, Dana is at the top. Dana means generosity. The second one, if you go around the little flower, the second one is precepts. And so that would mean the 5 mindfulness trainings, the 14 mindfulness trainings, the teachings from the Buddha, the precepts, even precepts that nuns and monks take, which none of us do. But those are the things that are mentioned in precepts. The third one is inclusiveness. I think we're all familiar with that because that's part of the Dallas Meditation Center mission statement as part of our values, that we are always being inclusive. And I like that because when I just look around in the room, I see a lot of different faiths represented, or at least people who came from different faiths. I see different ethnicities. I just see a nice blend of inclusiveness. So that's just what that means. The fourth one is energy, or sometimes it's called diligence. It's what Thich was referring to when he said you have to make an effort. You have to do something. The next one is meditation, which we're very familiar with and just experienced. And the last one is insight, or sometimes translated as understanding. So why does it begin with Dana? Why does it begin with generosity? I have not read anywhere an answer to that question, but when I ask myself that question, to me, it says, my answer comes back, it starts with openness. It starts with your heart. It starts with a feeling of generosity, an application of generosity in all of its various meanings. In fact, Thich said, Dana Paramita is the practice of love. We know that in Buddha's times, generosity or giving was very important because the Buddha and the disciples walked all over India pretty much. And everywhere they went, they depended on the people there to give them food, to supply a place to camp, for lack of a better word. And in those days, some of the wealthy people who owned land actually gave the Buddha land that he could use as a retreat. In the rainy season in India, it was very important to have one place where they could be. And that was a very important gift to give the Buddha. I've read that this Dana Paramita is in lots of lists. There are many lists of perfections in the Buddhist traditions. Theravada, Mahayana, which is the practice that we follow, they all have these perfections, these lists of perfections, but dana, giving, is always the first perfection on every list. So that tells you that even from the beginning of the Buddhist teachings, this perfection was very, very important. So these perfections can also be thought of as strengths or virtues that can lead us to enlightenment. Or as Thich says, practicing the Paramitas allows us to cross over to the other shore. I just want to say here right now that we don't have to wait for some miracle that we want to call enlightenment, because we can have small experiences of enlightenment every day. It just takes a mindful breath, a mindful smile, something that is motivated by the love that we feel for one another, the compassion that we feel for one another. And so crossing over to the other shore, you might cross over for 5 or 10 minutes or 30 minutes, but it tells us that it's possible. and that we don't have to wait until we consider ourselves completely enlightened, whatever that might be. So there's also this idea that we want to, the reason it's called Dana and Paramita is because it has to arise out of a pure motivation. And I want to talk about that. What does that mean to give with pure motivation? Basically, it means no strings attached. You give for the joy of giving. Give as an offering of love, not expecting anything in return. If you get a thank you, well, that's a bonus. But you don't ask for it and you don't expect it. Pure motivation is, again, another expression of unconditional love. So we're going to give as best we can under these conditions, and that's when it becomes pure motivation. That's when it becomes a perfect dana, a perfect way of giving. It depends on our hearts. It depends on how are we giving. Are we giving without any strings attached? Another important aspect of dana is to remember that there can be no giver without a receiver. There can be no receiver without a giver. So these two things are one thing. They're two sides of the same coin. And therefore, when you are giving, you're also receiving. When I'm receiving, I'm also giving. The two things are inextricably linked. They're two sides of the same coin. And as long as we are sorting ourselves into categories like givers and receivers, then we're also not practicing pure motivation. We're saying, oh, I gave X number of dollars, or, I gave to all these different charities. And well, that's not a pure motivation. So when we give, we have to realize that the receiver and the giver are both participating in this activity. And so we don't sort ourselves, and we don't. Well, I want to read something about that, because this is an important point. So let me just find this in my book. This is from Ezra Beda's book, Saying Yes to Life, Even the Hard Parts. He said, as many spiritual practitioners hold the perhaps unconscious view that money is somehow impure, yet simultaneously they value things only in proportion to what they pay for them. So it's sometimes difficult to talk about money in a nonprofit or in a charity, but I like also what he says as he was introducing this topic. He says, spiritual practice must include everything, even the temporal worldliness of money. We may imagine that, spiritual practitioners that we are, finances are not worthy of our consideration. Yet these issues make an especially rich field for practice. Money issues are rarely about money. Money issues are rarely about money. He invites us to observe our beliefs and behaviors around money. Try to see them with clarity and precision. Then bring awareness to the well of emotion out of which your beliefs and behaviors arise. You may discover that behind most financial insecurity is the terror of losing control or feeling helpless. Honestly facing this fear is the price we pay to be free. I would imagine that almost all of us have faced that fear at one time or another. The fear that we're not in control, the fear that we don't have enough. So we'll get back to that in a minute. I want to go back now and think about in the Buddha's time, and I've already touched on this, but monks would always go out every day with their bowl asking for alms, which I think was usually food. And most, I think what I've read in the old path, white cloud, is that they ate once a day, whatever they got in alms, which they shared. So sometimes when the Buddha and his disciples were traveling around India, they were invited to the homes of the people in the area to enjoy a meal. And I'm sure that was a very special occasion. Some wealthy followers gave him land, as I said before. I like that there's an interesting story about a monk, and apparently this happens in certain traditions in Japan. So what I read was in Japan, when monks carry out traditional alms begging, they wear huge straw hats that partly obscure their faces. The hats also prevent them from seeing the faces of those giving them alms. No giver, no receiver. Pure giving. I liked that. I like that image. And it made me think of in the past, I think it was when we did North Texas Giving Day, we were asking people for money, of course, and there was the idea that we could put people's names on a plaque, people that had donated. And interestingly, nobody wanted to put their name on a plaque. I think that's a perfect example of pure giving. In fact, many of the donations that we receive are anonymous. Another example of pure giving. So this spirit of generosity is a very important foundation of our practice. And it helps to tear down the ego walls that we all have. And also helps us to relieve some of the suffering in the world. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other paramitas. On the back of your little card, you can read, these are very, very brief descriptions. If you would like to know more about the paramitas, there's a really good section in Thay's book, Art of the Buddhist Teaching. So it says Dana is generosity of material gifts, gifts of Dharma, the gift of non-fear. There are some other gifts that Thay talks about in the book, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Precepts are the 5 and 14 mindfulness trainings, which I did mention. Inclusiveness, spaciousness, and openness of heart. Energy, also diligence, delighting in the practice. I love that, delighting in the practice. It's like not, I have to go meditate. It's, I get to meditate. Insight, seeing things as they really are, which in the Paramitas means recognizing Buddha nature. Like Michael mentioned, we all have Buddha nature, even the people that don't exhibit it very much, they still have it. And in the right circumstances, that Buddha nature can be touched. It can be manifested. So some of the practical aspects of Dana Paramita. First, we have to think about what it is we have that we can share. You know, when we do a metta meditation, we always say, first, you have to begin with yourself. You say, whatever it is you want to say, you start with yourself. May I be peaceful. May I be loving. Things like that. Then, once you've established that within yourself, you're ready to offer it to someone else. And this is the same with the Paramitas. So think about what it is can you share. Thich mentions in his book, the part of the Buddhist teaching, he mentions these ways that we can share. And he starts with true presence, just really being present with someone or with one another. And I feel we're practicing that right now. We've come, we're present. You look like you're paying attention. You look like you're involved. So true presence is something we can share. It's pretty easy to share, I think. The difficulties come when we're in a situation where there are too many distractions. You know, you get distracted and you can't really be fully present. But in this case, we're sitting here truly present. The second thing he says we can share is stability. And he's reminding me of the song we sing, breathing in, breathing out, sitting like a mountain, sitting very, very stable. We can offer that to people, especially when people are a little bit distraught. The fact that if you're able to sit with someone and be truly stable, it's very, very helpful. You don't even have to say anything. You just be present and be still and stable. Another thing he says we can share is freedom. Freedom from craving, from anger, jealousy, despair, fear, wrong perceptions. You know, you can name a lot of other things, but if we can rid ourselves of these kinds of afflictions, then we're able then to pass it on with someone else. It seems to me that this kind of sharing happens more like osmosis than anything that we say, or even anything that we do particularly. Thich says we can also offer our freshness. And there again is breathing in, breathing out. See myself as a flower, a fresh flower. Freshness has always been kind of enigmatic to me. I wasn't ever sure I knew how to do that, how to be fresh. I mean, the way I learned about fresh was if some guy was being fresh with me, you know, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think anybody uses that term anymore. Now you know how old I am. But freshness doesn't mean that. It means feeling within oneself that you are fresh. You're not tired. You're not worn out. You're just presenting yourself in a fresh way for whoever it is you're sharing with. Another thing he says we can share is peace. I remember Beth invited peace. So peace is something definitely that we can have within ourselves and that we can share. You know, you've experienced this when you're sitting next to someone who's very peaceful and calm. It feels good. You feel it. You feel it sort of radiate. The other thing Thich says we can share is space. And what he means by that, I think, is giving people space to be who they are, not having expectations. In fact, there is in the 14 mindfulness trainings, there is one of the trainings is about not imposing any, how does he say that? Not imposing any idea on anyone else, even your children. Don't even share, not even Buddhist ones. It's like, there's no, that is really space. That's giving everybody space to be who they want to be, who they need to be, who they manifest to be. And if that means for this time, the space they need is to be without me, well, okay. Or if it means that the space they need is someplace that I wouldn't want to inhabit, that also is okay. But I want to be spacious. I will hold that space. And the last one that he mentions is material resources. I think he leaves that one last, and that's just my notion, because of the thing I read about money. So my experience has been that people are always happy to donate something like old clothes or blankets, or you know what I'm talking about. But when you talk about money, there is some resistance often. But we're not asking, in this case, we're not asking anybody to share material resources, money, if they can't do it. And we do have people in that circumstance. That is why we practice inclusiveness. So those of us who can share money, that's something we can share. That's something we can do. So the challenge is to carry this practice of generosity into our whole life, not just practice it when we're here, but practice everywhere. I'm going to leave you with one quote from this guy again, Ezra Beta. And this is mostly still about money, but it works for anything, actually. Lost the page. Well, actually, there are two things on this page that I'd like to read to you. He says, of the many pitfalls on the spiritual path, gullibility and suggestibility are the two that are often hardest to see in oneself. I'm not sure gullibility fits here, but suggestibility kind of does. If someone in authority says, oh, you ought to do this, then sometimes we feel kind of like, yeah, we ought to do that. And the other one says, even spiritual discipline can become just another way to satisfy the need to feel in control. That to me says that, and I've known a few people like this, when they, especially in the beginning, they will almost overdo it, like really be so intent on becoming enlightened that they're meditating 6 or 7 hours a day. You know, they're restricting their diet. They're doing all kinds of really extreme things, which the Buddha warned against. And so I think that is also, doing things in that way is also one of the ways that people try to stay in control. So when I began this, I mentioned all of the things that I get requests from. And this year, I was thinking about this. This year, I'm going to combine all my contributions that I would ordinarily make to these different charities. And I'm going to make one donation to the nonprofit that means the most to me, the organization that aligns with my values, that I know is working to positively contribute to the global collective consciousness. The place where I'm sure that my donation is spent wisely and benefits everyone without discrimination. Can you guess what I'm talking about? The Dallas Meditation Center. The Dallas Meditation Center has been my spiritual home for 12 years. And it's in my heart. It's very important to me. So I hope when Giving Tuesday comes about, you will think about giving in a way that is pure, if you can, and know that it really, really is beneficial. It will make sure that the meditation center not only survives, but thrives, because we want to be a benefit to the whole North Texas community. It's as big as a Bodhisattva ideal. Thank you all. So I've talked a lot, and I would love to hear you. Anything that came up